On this Thursday night, keep calm and keep counting. As the last ballots are tallied in America's presidential election, could today be the tipping point?
We'll know very soon.
The potential paths to power. The mounting pressure from Trump supporters to stop the count.
They will not give us access.
The groundless claims about fraud and cheating. And Joe Biden and Canada, how a potential change at the White House could affect the Great White North. Plus, getting Canada's economy to recover from COVID-19.
This is a very, very complex situation.
Striking a balance between health and wealth.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us from Washington. The presidential election was Tuesday. It is now Thursday evening, and we are still in a holding pattern. Not all the ballots have been counted in some states where the races are very tight. This could be a decisive day, or it might not be. Here's where things stand right now. According to numbers from Associated Press, Democratic candidate Joe Biden is holding at 264, just 6 electoral college votes away from 270. That's the number needed to win the White House. Republican Donald Trump is at 214. Votes are still being counted in 5 key states. They're shaded in gray on this map. In Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Nevada, the margins are razor thin. A win in any of those states would give Joe Biden the presidency. Moments ago, Donald Trump gave a long, rambling statement at the White House that was filled with lies. We're only going to play a short clip. He claimed that he has won and is being cheated out of victory.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly.
There is no evidence of illegal voting. What is being counted are perfectly legal votes, many of them mailed in because of the pandemic. And Trump is on track to lose right now. He just can't seem to accept that. Joe Biden delivered a short statement this afternoon. His message, be patient.
We have no doubt that when the count is finished, Senator Harris and I will be declared the winners. So I ask everyone to stay calm, all the people to stay calm. The process is working. The count is being completed, and we'll know very soon.
Eric Sorensen is going to take us through the numbers and the potential path to victory in just a moment. Mike Armstrong is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where counting of the mail-in ballots is close to finishing, we understand. We'll start here in Washington with Jackson Proskow. Jackson, the Biden team calling for patience, sounding very confident, though, sending signals they're preparing to take power.
They really are. If you look at the tone and tenor of former Vice President Biden's speech today, it seemed to be an attempt to sound presidential. He was also sort of filling a void here left by what had been a prolonged silence from President Trump. We went almost 40 hours without seeing the president on camera. That's highly unusual. And really, this is about reassuring Biden's own supporters. His message to them is, we've got this, just give us time to finish counting the ballots. But really, he is sounding very confident tonight.
And then Donald Trump did emerge tonight, of course, at the White House and give a rambling statement saying he's being cheated out of victory. Is that catching fire with anyone? I mean, apart from his most diehard supporters?
Yeah, I think this is the question we need answered, because there were 69 million people who cast ballots for President Trump. But I think you're right. There's a smaller group that really hang on every word and take these types of things seriously. We need to point out time and time again, the president has been unable to produce any evidence of fraud. The campaign has tried court challenges in 4 or 5 states now. They keep falling apart because they can't produce evidence. And it's almost like they're using the courts to further push disinformation by making a big splash about going to court and then not delivering at the end of the day. And Donna, that really extends to the fact that the Trump campaign is even asking supporters now to help them find proof of voter fraud because it's just not there. They don't have it. They haven't been able to produce it yet.
All right, Jackson, thanks. I'm going to come back to you to talk about what this election might mean for the balance of power in Washington. But first, we want to look at the maps and the math. Eric Sorensen is tracking the tight races tonight. Eric, bring us up to speed.
Donna, the polls closed almost 48 hours ago, but in several states, it's still like election night. A record number of mail-in ballots that have extended the time to get a final count, and razor-thin races that give Joe Biden and the Democrats confidence, but also give Donald Trump and the Republicans hope. Here are some of the races to watch still. Pennsylvania, the president has a lead, but it is shrinking as mail-in votes are counted. North Carolina, close, but many expect Trump will ultimately win. Georgia, Biden has narrowed the gap, but they are running out of votes to count. Nevada, Biden is ahead just a few thousand votes. And Arizona, where it has been called by Associated Press, global news partner, the race there, though, has tightened since election night. It is frantic and nerve-wracking as several states count ballots, knowing that their outcome could determine the presidency. In Pennsylvania, Democrats sent in the vast majority of mail-in votes that are being counted now and making it closer by the hour.
People of Pennsylvania and the American people want answers from Pennsylvania. I can assure them, maybe going a little slow, but it's going very, very smooth.
Under any scenario, there is no path to victory for President Trump without Pennsylvania.
I feel very good about Pennsylvania. Virtually all the remaining ballots to be counted were cast by mail.
President Trump tweeted, "Stop the count." Of course, he doesn't want that in states where he trails, only where he has a lead that he wants to freeze before all the votes are counted. What cannot be ruled out, however, is a very close comeback win for Trump. Biden's lead in electoral votes, 264 to Trump's 214, puts Biden very close to the 270 needed to win the presidency. Of the outstanding states, Trump expects Alaska to go his way soon. He must, however, run the table on the other states, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Nevada, to go over the top. Biden only needs Nevada to go his way to reach 270 and win, according to Associated Press. Another wrinkle, Trump and some organizations are keeping Arizona in play, which would take 11 electoral votes away from Biden. But circle back to Pennsylvania. Put that in Biden's column, and it's all over. All the outstanding states, even clawing back Arizona to Trump, would not get him from where he is to 270. Biden taking Pennsylvania alone wins the presidency. While Joe Biden has more paths to victory, the more close finishes there are, ironically, the more challenges, legal and otherwise, that are potentially available to President Trump. Donna?
All right, Eric Sorensen in Toronto, thanks. Jackson, we haven't talked about this much, but it looks like the Republicans will retain control of the Senate. What might that do for Joe Biden if he becomes president?
And ironically, this actually speaks to sort of how ridiculous the president's election rigging claims are, because Republicans down ballot did really, really well here. You're right. The control of the Senate is going to go to a runoff, quite likely, in Georgia in two different races. Republicans could well be poised to hang on to it. Democrats do have control of the House, but big picture, this means they're going to struggle with their agenda even if Joe Biden becomes president. So those wish list things they talked about, like potentially expanding the Supreme Court or making Washington, D.C. a state, those would have to wait. And even on a more practical, immediate matter, when you talk about things like a relief package for the ongoing pandemic, that would be at the whims of what Republicans want if Republicans maintain control of the Senate. A lot of unhappy Democrat legislators, based on those results.
And a sign of how divided this country still is.
Absolutely.
Jackson Proskow, thank you. Pennsylvania is still counting ballots. Its 20 electoral college votes could decide the presidency, but the counting in one of that state's biggest counties has stopped. Mike Armstrong is in Pennsylvania. Mike, we're talking about Allegheny County. That's the area around Pittsburgh. What's happening?
Yeah, Donna, it's a little strange, but completely normal. County officials put out a press release overnight explaining what's happening and why. They have two groups of ballots that require a little bit of extra scrutiny. So they took today to do some administrative work, and they'll be back at counting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Now, why did those two groups of ballots require extra scrutiny? Well, the first group's about 29,000 ballots that were sent out with problems on them from the vendor, and they had to be reissued. County officials have to make sure that no one, for example, sent in two ballots, even by accident. The other group is about 6,000 ballots that have some sort of a mistake on them, something like a smudge from a printer, something like that, so they're not scannable. Now, in some cases, those ballots can still be used, but it takes extra time. So again, in Pittsburgh, they'll be back counting tomorrow morning, but here in Philadelphia, the counting continues. It's not a race, but more of a grind. Vote counters in the convention center in Philadelphia are processing and adding up ballots at a pace of about 10,000 an hour. As they go about it, this Democratic-leaning county and the ones around it cut into Donald Trump's lead more and more.
Legal votes matter!
Now, that is frustrating some. This is the scene outside the convention center, a protest by Trump supporters.
I don't trust those mail-in votes. I just don't trust them because anybody can send anything.
Now, across from that protest, another. Demonstrators who say every vote has to be counted.
I'm out here because our city of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, works so hard to mobilize many, many, many voters.
Now, as contentious as this is, it's also something else, completely predictable. This come-from-behind phenomenon is something political scientists call the blue shift, and it's something they've been studying for years.
All the Jeeps are voting right now.
That's right.
Basically, Democratic voters across the U.S. adopted mail-in and early voting before and in bigger numbers than Republican voters.
Thank you.
This was a group dropping off ballots in York County more than a week before the election. Now, Donald Trump, for the most part, dissuaded his supporters from voting early.
Ready to vote?
So, as the early votes are counted late in the process, Biden's closing the gap.
Thank you.
That is likely a major factor in why the Trump campaign is fighting tooth and nail.
They have 8 attorneys fighting us to...
2 Trump campaign officials are complaining again today about access to the counting process. A frustrated Corey Lewandowski going so far as to tweet out private phone numbers for a city lawyer.
What is going on in this city? What are you hiding? Open up the doors, let us in, let us 6 feet away so that we can have a free and fair election.
Now, the counting is a slow process and the fighting over it continues. But for Donald Trump, it's not that there's a lot on the line here in Pennsylvania. Everything's on the line. There is no path to victory for him without this state. Donna?
Okay, Mike Armstrong in Philadelphia, thank you. A little later, we'll check in with Jeff Semple, who's in Michigan, a state that has flipped in Biden's favor. First, though, over to the West Coast, to Portland, Oregon. Some protesters have taken to the streets there. Sarah McDonald reports.
This has been declared a riot. Dispersed immediately.
With the National Guard activated in the streets, this once vibrant downtown district looked ready for battle on Wednesday. Destructive demonstrators descended upon by 3 levels of law enforcement. A riot declared as windows were smashed and buildings vandalized.
Now it's election week, things have picked back up a little bit.
But this was likely regardless of the outcome of the presidential election. In fact, the damage and the unrest nationwide isn't as severe as expected. The protest culture, partisan or not, thriving in Portland, where the store Logan Petticolas works at was targeted again.
It's the death of small business in downtown. I mean, even the fact that we're having to put boards up in the first place is another nail in the coffin.
In Michigan and Arizona, Republicans, some heavily armed, stormed vote-counting centers, convinced a core pillar of the democratic process is rigged.
We just like to watch you count the ballots.
A dangerous conspiracy theory only further fueled by President Donald Trump.
If President Donald Trump won the election, he was going to burn the the plywood and the city down.
Most Americans, like Jacob Smith, are still just struggling to survive the pandemic. Politics aside.
Let's get back to get back. We're already dealing with one thing, this COVID thing, so we don't need to be dealing with that too.
The prospect of civil unrest in whatever capacity, only deepening the growing division, driving a wedge through the United States. That division only expected to be exacerbated once this election is called. The National Guard remaining on standby here, the state of Oregon still under a state of emergency that could be extended. Donna.
All right, Sarah McDonald in Portland, thanks. What if Joe Biden becomes the next president? Coming up, what that could mean for Canada. Global National is back from Washington in a moment. Welcome back to Washington. If Donald Trump does not win a second term, that will change the dynamic of America's relationship with all its allies, including Canada. Our chief political correspondent, David Aiken, has been looking into what a Joe Biden presidency might mean. David?
Well, Donna, the single most common thing that I'm hearing is that a Joe Biden presidency would bring some stability and predictability, some peace to the White House. And the value of that to many on this side of the border cannot be overstated. For example, when it comes to the economy, businesses need to be able to plan for the future, but Trump's constant retaliatory tariffs or threats of tariffs made that impossible. Removing that threat alone will brighten investment prospects in both countries. But Biden has also said that he will block the Keystone Pipeline, and that will be a major concern for many on this side of the border. But Biden is doing this because of his commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And on that file, the Trudeau government is expected to work in lockstep with the Biden administration to harmonize environmental regulations and costs right across North America. Finally, think about foreign affairs and defense. A change in who's who in the White House would likely mean a big change in attitude on Russia. That affects Canada's work in Ukraine and towards China. And that could change the outlook for the two Michaels currently being held hostage by China. Donna?
Lots of things at play. David Aiken in Ottawa, thanks. Balancing act still ahead, the pressure on provinces to juggle public health and the economy.
You're watching Global National.
We've been talking about numbers all week as we cover the U.S. presidential election, but there's another number affecting the lives of Canadians, the rising number of COVID-19 cases. Everyone is living under some kind of public health restriction right now. And as Mike Drolet explains, it is a tricky balance between keeping people healthy and avoiding economic hardship.
It was not a good news budget for Ontario by any means. In a year ravaged by COVID-19, how could it be? Premier Doug Ford laid out his plan for recovery.
And when the pandemic is over, Ontario will come back with vengeance, stronger and more prosperous than ever before.
But it's the path for balance that's still uncertain. Ontario's 7-day average for new cases continues to rise, even as restrictions are lifted in areas that have yet to show much improvement, like Peel Region. But epidemiologists argue with everything they've learned about COVID-19 this year, lockdowns should be only used as a last resort.
This is a very, very complex situation. I think that we really have to try to look at all the factors rather than just simplifying it between health and wealth.
In Quebec, it's been 10 days since red zone restrictions were extended until November, a move that hasn't been popular with businesses. The province's 7-day average of new cases is still high, but it's leveled off. And unlike Doug Ford, Premier François Legault isn't loosening the reins. The most critical situation is in Manitoba, where a series of outbreaks in long-term care homes has threatened to overwhelm hospitals, and the numbers point to worse days to come. The province's positivity rate for testing is at a critically high 8.9%.
What that's telling us is that what they're finding on the ground in terms of their cases is probably just the tip of the iceberg.
And that iceberg is certainly blocking any path to recovery. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
The Michigan model next, what led a swing state to flip back to its blue roots. We're back from Washington in a moment. Welcome back to Washington. Michigan is one state that had record voter turnout this year. Donald Trump nearly won the state in 2016, the first time it's gone Republican in more than 25 years. As Jeff Semple explains, this year, the president's pandemic policies and leadership style motivated lots of people in Michigan to vote against Trump.
Hamtramck, Michigan's most densely populated city, is home to a diversity of cultures and politics.
Some of them is Democrats, some of them is Republicans.
This business owner voted for Donald Trump in 2016, but this time round, he, along with the rest of the state, flipped to the Democrats.
Especially the whole corona, how he handled it was a big letdown, big, huge letdown that kind of put everybody's life in danger.
This swing voter says during Trump's term he was subjected to racism, which ultimately swayed his vote for Joe Biden.
He's attacking the Muslim.
And the people have spoken. And with the election behind us, now is the time for us to find common ground and come together.
But Biden's supporters aren't celebrating just yet, citing fears that the fight isn't over.
We are praying and wishing a peaceful transition.
Late Wednesday, Trump supporters tried to force their way into the building where the ballots were being counted, echoing the president's calls to stop the count. and prompting police to step in.
A small group of Trump supporters were back outside the building where the ballots are being counted again today, and they, like the president, are claiming fraud and promising to fight.
Outside, tensions erupted once again between Biden and Trump's supporters.
I witnessed ballots that were mismatched.
Braden Giacobazzi was one of the Republican Party's designated election observers allowed inside. He claims he was often prevented from seeing the ballots.
And you'd have to get up close to do that because you can't see it from 6 feet away. And they would step in the way and accuse us of trying to endanger their life because of COVID. They wielded COVID like a weapon.
But a Michigan judge denied Trump's request to halt the counting, which is now complete.
USA! USA!
These tensions and allegations of fraud, even without evidence, fueling fears about the potential for violence once a winner is declared. Jeff Semple, Global News, Detroit.
And that is Global National for this Thursday from Washington, D.C. I'm Donna Friesen. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.